Welcome to Sovereign Mamas, the podcast sanctuary for visionary women who are building lives, businesses, and legacies in alignment with their feminine power. I'm your host, Julia Jörg, intuitive business coach, mama of two, and systems strategist for solo-led entrepreneurs. Here, we honor both your sacred role as a mama and your wild vision as a changemaker. Expect soul-aligned strategy, raw storytelling, behind the scenes, and powerful conversations that support you in scaling your business without sacrifice. If you're done choosing between success and sovereignty, you're home. Let's begin. Welcome to the Sovereign Mamas podcast. Today we are here with Lauren Hall, and be prepared, sit down, relax, and really be prepared for a powerful story. Lauren, I'm very excited to talk to you today because it's a transformation that you've described in a short email with me, and I'm really looking forward to dive into all the angles as much as we can in our time together today. First of all, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
So let me start us off, because in the share that you sent over, you said something that stood out to me. You said, "I didn't choose sovereignty, it chose me." Can you take us into that moment when you realized you could no longer outsource your power? So not as a woman, not as a mother. What did sovereignty begin to look like in practice when the fire was lit?
Well, it was actually way before I even started a lot of my working. Oh no, it was probably at the start of my teaching career. And I was juggling a lot. I got into teaching because I wanted to make a difference. This is before entrepreneurial and owning a business. I had just had a daughter on my own at the age of 22, and it was roughly when she was probably about 3 or 4, and we had our third hospital stint. So she was battling quite a lot of respiratory and asthma type symptoms from birth to about 5 years. And I remember going into that hospital and almost losing her on that third time again, and then also having to return back to work within the same week, and just having so many questions float around my mind, like, is this it? Like, am I the only one going through this? And having a lot of questions around the system itself. Obviously, I was in a classroom. I was managing 30 families, if not more, and then going home to juggle my own daughter on my own as a young mum. And I think there was a line in the sand drawn back then where I was like, this can't be it. Like, it can't work like this. It just didn't make sense. Yeah.
Wow, it's I mean, it's so hard to put everything that you go through in a nutshell, and express how and all the feelings that you had throughout this time, and then reclaiming your power and these thoughts that you had, and then turn it around. A lot of people crumble, they don't, they see it maybe, but you broke generational cycles, and then you turned that pain into purpose. But you already said it. It's probably not linear. So how did you navigate this self-doubt while creating a new path for your family, and especially in that phase of a system that kept pushing pills and silence? And what did inner leadership look like on your
Well,
day?
it definitely wasn't linear from that point. So, like, and I remember that week there was a lot of like sadness and rage that came up inside me, and I remember thinking, this can't be all my own. And I thought it was tied to a lot of the connections that I had with the families in my classroom. And then when I had more time to sit with myself and sit with my actual family about my own upbringing and all the things and talk about all these issues on a larger scale, I realized that it wasn't just coming from me. It wasn't just coming from my experiences that I was having with my daughter and myself. It was coming from way back down the line, on my mum's side in particular. And yeah, then I was like, okay, well, I didn't have a lot of information back then. I was only like 24, 25, and raised in a very, um, they were Christian orientated, and they were very deep in the system, and they meant well, and I have a lot of love for them, but there was not a lot of knowledge around me on how to navigate outside of this life that I was stuck in. And I thought, well, I've got at least 30 families underneath me too. Like I'm going through this in my home space, but I can't just dump and run all these families in my classroom. What am I going to do? So I didn't have a sort of a linear journey where I just was like, okay, no, I'm going to cut out of the system and become sovereign. It was a sort of up and down for many years until I was probably about how many years? 8 years after that, and my daughter was inching into high school, and I thought, if I don't make this change now, if I don't start reclaiming my life, my sovereignty, and really building outside the classroom instead of trying to save every family that was in the classroom. I grew up a little bit and realized, well, hang on a minute, the way I'm going to make the most difference is by saving myself first and pouring from the overflow, which again, we don't get taught this as mums. There's a lot of particularly inside the system before you become sovereign, there's a lot of this, you've got to give and give and give. As a teacher, as a mum, there's not a lot of support of, nourishing you as the mother and being put in a space where you can pour from overflow. That's not what they want. So I realized that I had to do that. I had to remove myself from my teaching career and embark on something completely different in order to come back as a teacher and make a difference. But it all started with my healing journey first and foremost before I could do any, impact.
Yeah, and that's a realization. I feel like a lot of women. I can't speak for men, but I do feel that a lot of women go through this, and once they catch when we catch ourselves in that moment, hang on, it's got to start with us. Then the real journey actually begins. So and now you mentor women who want more truth, more purpose, and more joy in their lives. Um, from your perspective, what's actually keeping most women stuck? Like, what's the lie you wish more mamas would would stop believing, especially those quietly craving a liberated life?
Um, I think it's generational, to be honest,
Mm.
because a lot of the conversations I have um, are not just centered around their own beliefs. It's like what the family's been doing for like what my mother did or what my mother's mothers did, and or what society is telling me to do. And um, I'm mentoring a lot of women that aren't necessarily, deep in their sovereign journey. They're coming to me because they've seen me being part of the system and then now not, and wondering how I got out, how I did it. But then there's a whole lot of untangling and um, skills building that you need to have within yourself as a woman, as a mum, when you've been operating over here in one system and you want to go and live another way of life. Like it's almost like a cutting of the cord that needs to happen. You need to learn new mindsets, new ways of being, and new understandings within yourself, and not just from a mental state or emotional state, from a physical state. You need to understand how your body works so that you can listen to it. and registered to it, to be able to then shift over here into your new way of life. And yeah, I think there's not a lot of conversations that are had, because it's all centered around how we live, how we view health, and it's all sort of intertwined with community, our lifestyle. And like I said, a lot of the women they desperately want to be operating sovereign over here, but they're stuck in this outdated system over here. And a lot of the time they have to choose between not just themselves and what they want, they have to choose going against sometimes their family, their friends, their partner. I know for one, last year was probably my pivotal moment in all of this sovereign life. And it cut deep because I still had my kid half in the schooling system. So I was a little bit conflicted from that, and half out. And then I had my mum, who was very unwell, battling cancer deep in the system. And I was trying to support her, and at the same time living this sovereign, or trying to live this sovereign free life. And in order for me to honor me over here, there was times where I literally had to cut the cord with my own mum. And I'm not going to lie, like, it broke me. I went on a very dark journey last year, and yeah, if someone had sat me down, years back and said, hey, well, you're going to have to, when you say you want to put yourself first and you want all this healing, there is a cost, there is a price to pay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. A lot of, yeah. And I so resonate with this because it's when you are deep in it and this journey of your own becoming, it is like, I think the number one thing that people stops doing that and maybe makes them second guess and doubt oftentimes is the question, what if I outgrow my partner? What if I outgrow my family? Will lose other like people who are now close to me. And that can be scary because it's your
Network.
close, it's yeah, you're normal, right? And having that trust in yourself and then still stepping further into the unknown, it just takes, yeah, a lot of courage, a lot of self-awareness and definitely also like this openness of being in full connection with your guides. So it's a combination of many things, but once you know, you know. And then it's also like it's hard. You can't go back, right? You can't once you open the jar, you can't really go back because then you're on it. But so you're leading in two different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this one part that you're doing alternative education and decentralized wealth. What is it that for you ties those two missions together? Um, and why is it essential that we start viewing things like money, health, wealth, and motherhood as part of that same sovereign conversation, like the conversation around sovereignty?
Okay. Well, it sort of ties back. When I first started getting into family mentoring, and I was doing it when I was teaching in classrooms, and that's when I realized that, like, my passion lies there and not necessarily always teaching. It's a bit of both. And I had a knack with helping families with behavioral situations, mentoring them around that, and giving them um, experiences inside the home as well as in the classroom, things around their health, nutrition, all the things. But I realized that I was only sort of giving them answers to half the equation. When I started doing my healing within my own upheaval, when I transferred from, being deep into the system to not, I realized that, well, hang on a minute, like, I'm only giving them a vehicle with 2 wheels, and I need to sort of coach them on, yeah, I've got this space over here where they can bring their kids and they can be, in a lot of the time I'm either in their home or they're in mine. So they have that deeper connection first and foremost. We're building within the families that I mentor and that are in that space. They have a community, which is essential for this way of living. Um, and then on top of that, I felt like a lot of the conversations I was having with mums, particularly around their own sovereignty, was their wealth or their capacity to hold wealth was tied up with in whatever their partners were doing. And so therefore tied up in their decision making and not their own. Um, and then when I started really sort of developing myself and my own wealth capacity abilities and diving deep in the online space and developing things for myself, I realized, like, this is the missing piece. This is why I've been capped for so long, because I'm not playing the whole game. I'm not dealing with the whole vehicle and driving with the 4 wheels. I've only got half of it. And um, just in the short period that I've been online, in 2 years, the life that I've been able to provide as a single mum to my own daughter, like the pennies have dropped. Yeah, so I quickly started learning that to be completely sovereign and to be in full power within our own being is looking at the family unit first and foremost, looking at what is a mother's role, what is a woman's role, and sort of dismantling that from, say, like the mainstream sort of beliefs and narratives and a lot of, ways of being, and converting it in a way where we have our power back, that we call it back, not just with our lifestyle, not just with our health, but in the way that we, can generate wealth. Because essentially, I know there's a lot of like old narratives around, having a lot of wealth is, greedy and it's bad for you, all these, darker thoughts. But I realized, actually, if it's held in the right capacity and in the right hands, it can actually provide a lot of impact, not just for yourself as a woman and as a mother and for your family, but it can provide a lot of impact within the wider community, globally, basically anyone you connect with, and who they connect with. So it sort of like carries that ripple effect way beyond the currency, if you get what I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I love that. And I think it's yeah, we need to have more conversations like this because it's about time that women and those people who mean well, and like you say, power isn't bad. I think it's so wrongly connotated in so many different areas, but if it's in the right hands and if we are coming from this frequency of truth, then it just is impacting and it's for the good. Um,
Mm.
yes. So I would love to also a little bit more understand when you say you are living outside the system. So what does that really look like?
Well, it's evolving. It's evolving each year. I first started with mentoring and teaching outside the system. Um, and I back then I was like, well, I'm healing myself. I'm doing this. Like, I'm living the sovereign life. Like, whoa, this is amazing. Um, but I realized that it cut a lot deeper than that, and it wasn't until I started really healing the deeper inner work within myself that I could then provide more of an impact with the work that I do. Um, and things just around like the old narratives around how we live, how we view each other, how we view ourselves. Like those things have been ingrained in me and probably my mom and my grandmother's generation for I can't even tell you how many generations back, but it's deep. And so, yeah, there was a lot of, I feel like I got halfway with supporting a certain amount of families in my local area with having this beautiful space where they could come and they're held and supported, and we were doing all this um, life coaching and mentoring, and I was making a difference with their family little unit. Um, but I realized on some level I was still capping myself. I was still limiting myself to just that number of families. And it wasn't until I got into the online space that I realized, whoa, like I can just get online and have a couple of conversations and literally be talking to someone that lives halfway across the world. Then they can take that knowledge and that impact, they can take it down to their group of people that will then spread it again and again and again.
Mm.
And yeah, just having that deeper understanding of like networking. And again, like there's a lot of like negative narratives around network marketing or online space, or like you said, the wealth. And it wasn't until I started doing a lot of the deeper inner work with that and shifting it away from, hang on a minute, it's actually not as negative as what is being portrayed. And how can I shift it in a more positive, pragmatic space? So yeah,
Mm.
that's where I feel like the full way of being sovereign has really opened up for me. It's not just what I'm doing for
Mm.
myself and how I'm living, in my little local area, and not buying into like, not going to the supermarkets to get my food. I'm dealing with like local farmers and living like more off the land. And I'm connecting with more holistic people, and I'm really quite lucky and abundant in where I live. Um, there's a lot of people in my local area here that have all joined forces, and I feel very supported. But yeah, being a teacher, having the teaching background, I realized I'm like, well, there's people everywhere. There's people all over the world that need this support, not just in my backyard. And who am I if I'm sitting online and I'm doing all this, good, creating all this wealth, having this success over here? Why am I holding back on showing those gifts and letting it impact, you know, other areas of the world? Why am I just capping myself to my little local area? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's powerful. It's definitely the easiest time probably to amplify our voices and really like connections like these. You're in
Mhm.
Australia, I'm in Bali, but then you can have your interviews, and this is your first podcast interview, and there are
Yeah.
many more to come. So this is
Yeah.
amazing. Just keep networking, keep connecting with other women, because this is really, yeah, this is the way to bring our missions out. And final question, maybe this is a little bit repetitive, but in the Sovereign Mamas community, we talk a lot about the embodied leadership, and you touched upon it. And again, like, what does it look for you now? Just, being not just the big wins, but also in the everyday moments with your daughter, with your clients, with yourself.
Well, I think probably first and foremost with my daughter, like I've had a lot of emotional wins with her over the last 12 months, because she's at that rite of passage age of 18. She turned 18 this year.
Mm.
And it's all been happening, all the big life things, the big changes that happen, from child into womanhood. And just, I think the biggest win that sort of hit me the most is, I'm gonna get all emotional now,
Okay.
is her having the comfortability and having the voice that she has, not just with me at home, but seeing her have such a free way of being with her voice and who she is. Because I didn't have that. I watched my mother not have that. I watched my grandmother not have that. And I think it was one of the biggest reasons why I started teaching back in the day too, to help families, not just children have a voice, but for families to have a voice. And yeah, I think it was very healing for me on another level too, because being a young mum, I've had to go through a lot of scrutiny, not just shifting from mainstream into sovereignty, but just being a young mum. And I've always, on some level, had a lot of doubt or negativity creep in about, who I am as a woman, a mother. What am I doing as, her parent? But to see her be so free and so strong within her being, with boys, with her friends, with her co-workers, like just, yeah, within herself. It's, yeah, I've had a lot of moments where I've like, I've held it together in front of her, and then I've got back in the car and I've had like a little, weeping moment because I'm like, I did it. I've done it, and then to then be in a position of, I don't want to use the word power, but I like the word impact. To be in a position where I can provide that impact upon other mothers with their young daughters or even their young sons is like, I know the wealth is great because it creates choices, right? In the way that I can live and operate. But as a human being, on a basic level, when people say, are you happy with your life? And I had this question come up the other week with a friend. We were just talking about life. And he asked, would you be happy if you died tomorrow? And I actually was like, answered it quite honestly. Yeah, I would. I know I've got a lot to give, and I have a life to give, but on a deeper level, the impact that I've been able to provide, just even in the short 4 to 5 years that I've broken from mainstream, like a lot of people can't say that they've been able to do that in their lifetime. And then just to be able to sit here and talk to you about it, and you know and realize that, oh, like, I'm just at the beginning of my journey and there is so much more to give. It's yeah, it's it just blows my mind. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah, well done, Mama. Absolutely.
Thank
Getting
you.
goosebumps, and that's it's beautiful. It's just like, this is why I love hosting this podcast, because it's just like each and every single woman who comes on has these amazing, mind-blowing stories to tell. And I'm like just thinking, like you, how is this possible that we we sit all in our small little bubbles, but then when you connect and you really go out, and I've been doing the online thing for over a decade now, right? So I have connections, and I had people come back on my podcast who have, they were on my podcast 5 years ago, and the evolution that you see. So when you say you are at the beginning of your journey, come back to this interview in 5 years and listen to it.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing how we grow, and yes, these faces to watch and to observe, and yeah, it's just amazing. And I'm happy.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy that you took out the time and that you shared all these little nuggets with the listeners, because it's conversations like these that make the shifts and that keep others inspired and going, right? Maybe you are sitting at home listening to this thinking, oh wow, it takes is really coming back home. It's coming back to myself. And then what's most important? Taking a
Mm,
night action and really going for it, because we only have this one life, right? So
yeah. And I
um
think I'd just like to add, Julia, is when I started understanding what it is to be a mum, and what it is to be a woman first and foremost, and
Mm.
how how that fits into being sovereign, and just understanding the sheer power behind that. Like as women, what we hold, our gifts that we've been given from the universe in the way like our bodies work, how we can feel things, and we feel things really deeply. To if anyone's out there listening and you're wondering, well, how do I shift? How do I find the answers? The first place you need to look and need to really honor beyond your health is that inner voice. That inner voice be like, oh, but I feel this, but everyone else around me is telling me that. Well, shut that off and listen to your inner voice and follow that. And it might lead you down a dark path for a minute. That's okay. But if you keep listening and you keep pursuing forward with it, eventually you'll find the answers that, that really click and really align and then provide the life
Yes.
that you really want to be living.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't want to go into my birth stories, but what I found in those moments where I I really and I had like one free birth, and the first one was almost like a free birth already because I was so letting myself go through this experience. I'm a bit of a rebel since since I was young. But then in this moment of when it just happened and I said, well, this is the most natural thing. Like our bodies know. So why not just let it happen, right?
Yeah.
It's then a lot of things for me shifted to when I saw, all right, this is what others, because you hear all these horrible birth stories and you hear women choosing things. And I'm not, you know, saying that whatever was right for you in those moments is right. But for me, it then just clicked and I said, okay, if I get told in other areas of my life that this needs to happen in a certain way, but right now I'm just living through an experience that society tells me you have to be in a hospital to give birth to your children. You have to have certain ways of doing things. And I just experienced it in the most beautiful, most raw way on my own. So hang on, where else am I
Yeah.
being fed like things that aren't
Yeah. That's
true?
that's the questioning, right? You've got to have that, you've got to have the questioning. Be
Yeah.
curious, but also have a lot of trust within your inner voice.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I know we could talk we could
Oh
talk
my gosh. I
this.
could, and now that you've just said your birth story, I'm like, I've got a juicy nugget for you around not just my birth story, well, my own birth story with my mum, which makes so much sense.
Mm.
Um, around like there was a lot of trauma around how I came into this world. And then there was a lot of trauma in how I birthed my daughter at the ripe age of 22, but that was because I didn't know any different. I wasn't being shown or being exposed to anything different. Um, but even that, juxtaposing that experience to how I'm living my life now, like, can we just, I think if there's one little golden nugget that you need to really do other than listening to your inner voice, if anything numbs you in any way and you're giving in to that to sustain some sort of life or relationship or way of being,
Mhm.
like that's, you got to cut the cord with that. If you want to live over here and be sovereign and be free, you
Mhm.
know, you've got to give in to feeling everything and listening not just to your inner voice, but yeah, understanding how it is to feel, you
Mhm.
know, to
Yeah.
to feel, to connect.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes it's intense and it's a lot, but that's the rite of passage that, that comes along with being sovereign, being alive.
Yeah. I 100% agree. This living through your deepest and darkest fears, like once you've
Mm,
survived that, then you're
mm,
on the other side, nothing like, but you've got to live through it.
yeah,
A lot of people are manifesting exactly what they're most afraid of because they're like keeping that vibration. And then once they are, on the other side there understand, oh, I can actually,
Yeah, you can
I
do
can
this.
handle my biggest fears. So bring it on.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the biggest gift that I've been given when I look back at the journey and I try and make sense of it all. Why did I go through this? Why was I gifted that? What lesson came out of that?
Hmm.
And it was that. It was like, I think I remember as a young girl wanting to, I remember when I was like probably preschool age, and I was struggling a lot with bullying, being the kid that was labeled ADHD, the weirdo that didn't fit in. So like right then, and I knew I was like, I want to be sovereign now. Like I can't make it in this system that I keep having to rock up and go to 9 till 3. It's just killing me, and it didn't make sense. But I've now just lost my train of thought. But I just remember back then that the only way out of all that was, I'm going to have to feel things. I'm going to have to go through all of this. And I wanted to create a lot of impact. So I guess when I was asking the universe back then, I want to help people. I'm going through this. And I remember being that kid that used to step in when any of my friends were bullied or, something was going on. I was like the rebel with a crusade, like we're gonna overcome this. Um, and it makes sense now why I went through all the things that I went through in my life. It's because, the universe was trying to instill a lot of skills in me to then be able to come years later with, the insight of compassion, with the insight with humanity, the insight of womanhood, the insight towards being sovereign, and I feel like I've only got a deeper understanding of what that means over here now living it because I've gone through all that, because I've had all the adversity, because I've had the struggles and the challenges on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what a conversation.
We
Well,
could go on for hours,
I
couldn't
know.
we?
Thank you so much. Well, if you felt goosebumps, truth bumps, or just that deep inner knowing light up inside of you while listening, you're not alone. And I think that's also the biggest mission here. This is exactly why I created the Sovereign Mamas podcast, to bring in and bring on these stories of women who don't just talk about change, but actually embody it. And in their motherhood, in leadership, in everyday life. So Lauren reminded us that serenity isn't something we earn, it's something we reclaim, right? And it's not in a perfect moment, but in the real ones, the messy, the miraculous middle of our lives. So I really invite you to come back and re-listen. Stay tuned for next episodes. This is your path, and like we said today, allow yourself to feel it, go through it, and you'll be on the other side in no time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lauren, again, and I shall see you next time.